Alexa. I'm head of community at House Call Pro.
My name is Roland. I'm one of the co-founders of House Call Pro.
We host the Pro Talks webcast series. You can think of it as a TED Talk for people of the trades and blue-collar workers.
So when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of information coming from the federal government, from the local governments, and we wanted to make sure that we could take that information, deconstruct it, make it simple and actionable for our home service professionals to be able to make sure that the money coming from the government would hit their banks so that they could stay open and ultimately growing.
So it started off as a response, has really turned into this amazing public service, and we've had the opportunity to have on so many incredible guests to our show.
We have hundreds of live viewers, and the recorded version gets viewed millions of times. Our audience consists of home service professionals and small business owners. Join us and make season 2 the best season yet.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Pro Talks. Me, myself, but really Alexa, our co-host, and our special guest today, we have Mack and Story. So want to start off with a quick intro of our guest today, and then we're going to dive into some topics. And before we do that, we're going to have the Lightning Greenberg round, which Alexa will take us into. So quick intro of Mack and Rhea. So Mack began his career in manufacturing and blue collar work, really on the front lines in the machine shop. He grew himself into the upper level management and found a niche in the lean manufacturing, and along with it, developed his passion for leadership. So 20 years he spent working on the front lines. And so on his leadership training that we're going to be diving into today, we're going to take that practical experience plus the leadership knowledge and deliver it to you guys in bite-sized chunks so you guys can digest it. He's logged over 11,000 hours leading leaders in the blue-collar teams through process improvement, organizational change, cultural transformation, and speaks with his wife, Rhea, on personal growth and leadership development. All over the U.S., you guys have been, and you're helping leaders transform their cultures and develop these high-performance teams. So a lot of white-collar leadership in a blue-collar world and exposing our pros to that, which is why we're so excited to have you guys on Pro Talks. So together with Rhea, you guys founded Top Story Leadership, your guys' company. You guys have tons of published books. I've got a lot of them. These are just some of them, by the way, guys, and we've been doing a ton of reading. So amongst that, today we're going to be talking about specifically the transformation equation, which is a big component of what Mack teaches on the Blue Collar Leadership series.
So to start us off, where do you live?
Atlanta, Georgia.
And I think your answer is the same. So let's go to the next question. What is your proudest accomplishments?
For me, it's actually rebuilding my relationship with my son because I got things so wrong in life. Basically, from the time he was 15 to 19, I really didn't have a relationship. But when he was 17, I discovered the type of stuff we're going to be speaking about today, leadership, personal growth, and I was able to rebuild that relationship and actually get him into reading these type books.
Oh, that's fantastic. Something that I've learned throughout is these teachings, even though they're meant for business, like they really are for your personal life too. And if you start with yourself, it makes the impact on the business that much greater.
Yep. He's 29 today, so we've been back like friends for the last 10 years. Really good friend.
Oh, that's awesome. What is the biggest crowd you guys have ever spoken in front of?
For me, Rhea's a rock star, but for me, it's 1,500. We spoke to 1,500 water professionals at a conference for all the water professionals from the state of Georgia, actually in Savannah a few years back, and Rhea's had a crowd a little bigger than that.
Mm-hmm. About 2,000 probably for me, so just a little ahead.
At a Maxwell event.
just a little ahead.
Big crowds. What is the favorite thing about your guys' career?
For me, it's just being able to impact the group that I think is the most overlooked and underdeveloped group out there, and it's the blue collar workforce. Not just the leaders of the blue collar workforce, but the folks doing the work. That's really where my passion is. And you guys know I started my career the first 10 years frontline entry level factory worker, so they're still close to my heart. Although we speak to all types of groups, high level people, that's what really gets me excited, is making an impact with a lot of folks. Maybe we're going to impact through you guys.
I think you're correct. Besides your own books that you've written, because you've written a lot and done a lot of speaking events, what is a book, podcast, or course that has been life-changing for you?
Pretty popular one. A lot of people have heard of it, but it's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I was exposed to that 2008 after 20 years in my manufacturing career, and that was the first time I'd ever been exposed to anything like the stuff we talk about and write about today, and it's transformed my life. It's still the number one book out of hundreds of books that I've read, and probably thousands of hours of audio and video. That book's still number one.
That's quite the endorsement. What about you, Rhea? Curious.
Yeah, for me, I would say the 5 levels of leadership was very impactful. It's hard to pick just one. Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute was also very, I would say, life-changing for me.
Yeah, Maxwell's book has been very transformational. All right, what's something that someone wouldn't know about you? Something that not a lot of people know?
Well, I've been reading every day since 2008. I discovered that book, but most people wouldn't know that I hate to read.
An author who hates to read.
But I love to learn more than I hate to read. So, but I still hate to read.
Have read. There's a difference.
I like to have read. I like to close a book, but as soon as I do, I open another book. So.
Does he like to learn? And how about you, Bria?
Something most people don't know. I used to mountain bike, and I was the 2011 and 2012 state mountain biking champion in the women's division for Alabama and Georgia.
I was eating her dust. I was going down the hill. I was a little crazier, so I had to get behind going down the hill. But going up the hill, I was way back there.
That is impressive. And what is a skill or talent that you wish you had?
For me, I'd actually like to speed read. I think. So you had to skip a lot of stuff, so I'm not sure. But that's something I'd actually always thought about trying to learn how to do.
Yeah, there's some apps out there actually that help learn or teach you speed reading, and they'll take a book and help guide your eyes, because it's all about where your eyes are in the words to do that right. So that's a cool skill. What did you want to be when you were a child, a kid, besides an astronaut?
I'm a Marine, and I landed on Paris Island September 10th, 1987.
Nice.
And our last question of the Light and Greenberg round, what is the best quality you think a good person can have?
For me, can you guys still see me? Something happened with our screen, but
Yeah, we can still see you.
Okay, I don't know what happened on our end. Authenticity. I think that's the big trait that, there we go. That's a trait that I think someone would have, authenticity. And one reason is because be authentic requires you to have a whole lot more character traits than just that one.
I definitely agree, and it's kind of the cornerstone or the building block where upon everything else is built, because without it you can't move forward.
Yep.
So let's dive into the meat of the transformation equation. So can you share a little bit why you and Rhea created this and created Top Story Leadership, and what the principle of blue-collar leadership is?
We really worked on the transformation equation because we needed to be able to communicate in a clear way and give people kind of a roadmap for transformation. Transformation's a lofty sounding goal, but how do we actually nuts and bolts put it into practice? Like, how do we go from where we are to where we want to be? And it's not so much about what we do so much as transforming who we are, because that drives what we do. So really this was just a way that we could put down what the different components were, and then what happens when one of the components is missing, because that creates a number of problems that most of us are familiar with, and sometimes all of the elements of transformation are missing and we have complete chaos, and that can be a problem too, and I've worked in some of those organizations. So
relative to what blue-collar leadership is, you asked that too, right?
Yes.
So what blue-collar leadership is, and you kind of touched on it a little bit maybe when you were introducing me, but what I did was when I got exposed to this content, I started realizing all these principles that white-collar executives were being taught was most of the things that I started learning when I started reading all the time and got exposed to the 7 habits and started seeing, who was sitting in the room when I'd watch videos with Dr. Covey speaking about the 7 habits. It wasn't blue-collar people sitting in the room. At least I didn't look like it anyway, and probably were not. But anyway, once I figured that out, I wanted to basically take the white-collar, the principles that I was learning that were being taught to the white-collar executives, primarily, although the books were for anyone. I wanted to take my blue-collar experience, my blue-collar stories, wrap it around these same principles and package it in a way that could be accessible and actually interesting to the blue collar workforce, those who lead them and those who support them. So basically what blue collar leadership is about is helping leaders engage the front line to improve the bottom line by developing the blue collar workforce, those who lead them and those who support them. That's basically the mission.
Mm-hmm. And you are particularly passionate about bringing it to this crowd of people who this is the first time they're doing it and the first time they're learning about these concepts, not something that's been taught to them in, like an MBA course. So I think that's fantastic. And we are going to be doing a book giveaway from one of the Blue Collar Leadership series. It's the 5 components for building high performance teams. So we're actually today, well, before we get into what we're diving into today, can you give us a brief breakdown of what the book teaches, that specific book, because you have many?
Yeah, we've got 26 books plus 6 journals from RIA. So this book, and you kind of touched on this, way I want to answer that is we were speaking actually to a group of precast concrete business owners in Louisville, Kentucky from all around the country. And those 25 guys had never heard of anything like we were speaking about. That's what still blows my mind away is how many people are just like I was in 2008 who've never really been exposed to this. And as we talked about it, they were so interested and one of them at the end was very interested. He actually ordered 400 books within a week and had us out to Seattle and Boise, Idaho, Seattle, Washington, Boise. And but this book is a book I wish I would have had written at that time to give him. And I talk about him in the book. He was one of the motivating factors caused me to write it because he was gung-ho. He was all bought in, even though he'd been in business 40 years and was just now hearing this and was very successful. He said this was the missing piece. We had talked about blue collar leadership and supervision that at that time. And so I wrote this book for the owner, the leader, like Tim, who wants to do it but does not know how to do it. What it's all about is becoming a sought after employer choice in your industry. I mean, that's what it's about.
What do you think the common characteristic of these folks, especially that owner who'd been in the business for over 40 years but hadn't learned about any of these strategies yet? What do you think the reason is that they're able to get that far without these core principles? And yeah, go ahead.
The funny answer, because I tell people the one reason that people can be effective and successful in business without applying these core principles is because most of their competition isn't doing it. Mm-hmm. That's what I tell leaders when they're in a room with me and I'm speaking about this book. If you'll adopt what's in this book and nobody else is doing it in your industry or anywhere in your area of operations, you're gonna slay the dragon because you won't have to be looking for good people anymore. You'll be attracting great people. Anyone would know with common sense, it's a lot easier to be highly effective when you're attracting great people instead of searching for good people. So a lot of companies who don't do this, that's what we hear from them. I talk about it in one of the early chapters in the book about people, saying we it's kind of different now because I wrote the book right before last year before the crisis hit that we're in now, and unemployment was really, really low. But the principles apply all the time. But one thing we hear when we go all across the country, we were in 40 states last year. What we heard last year all the time, we just can't find any good people. Like they're not out there. The good people are out all over the place, but they're looking for a company that's a good company with good leaders. Really good people have options. They don't have to work somewhere they don't want to work. And so if we want to, who we are is who we attract on an individual basis and also on an organizational basis. Who we are collectively determines who we attract. You want to say something, Bill?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. You think of great organizations, they attract people from all over the place. And so it's not a geographical issue, it's a leadership issue. And we see that good employees do have options. And so they're looking for more, particularly as there are more opportunities available and people are more mobile, it's much easier to find those opportunities. More transparency.
Mm-hmm. It's not just a one-way interview, the owner interviewing the employee. If that's a good employee, especially they're interviewing you too to see if you're someplace that they want to work at. So I really, like you said, really good people have options.
Absolutely.
And also a team of great people attract other great people, because you want to be on a team with high performing athletes around yourself, similar to you, so that you can accomplish great things. So let's talk a little bit about this transformation equation. I know you guys have it kind of divided into 5 different blocks to yield some sort of effect, but can you kind of give us an overview on what these are in this formula and how our pros should be thinking about it?
Sure. So the first block is leadership development, and we kind of divide that in 2 parts. That's leadership development of self, so the leader has to be growing and developing themselves, and then leadership development of the team members too. So there's kind of 2 parts to that, because leadership is influence, and we've got to know first as leaders, how do we influence other people? How do we influence our team members? How do we engage them to do more than they just have to day by day, right? How do we get the above and beyond, the extra inch, the extra mile? So we've got to know how to influence them.
Yeah, let me just jump in right there when Rita's talking about leadership development, leadership being influence, because all the pros out there, all the folks listening to this, it's one of those common sense questions I ask all the time. But whatever it is they're trying to accomplish, they want better people on their team, if they want more business, if they want better referrals, if they want all that's based on influence. They got to have influence to get it. More influence is going to lead to all the right stuff. Less influence is going to lead to stuff you don't want. That's why this book, but any leadership book by anybody that's talking about leadership the way we speak of it, leadership is influence, which is really character development. Character development is leadership development, and personal development is the foundation of leadership development, just like Rio was saying there. So that's, for anyone listening, that's why this is important. Leadership is influence. Whatever you're trying to accomplish in your business, whatever it is, or at home with your family, it's going to be easier with more influence or less.
Mm-hmm. Big or small?
More, always. Yeah, that makes sense. And what do you guys think goes into leadership? So I don't want to get just into, because this is an entire book, but talk to me about some ways that you think someone could develop leadership, because it sounds like what you guys are saying, that leadership isn't something that's genetic and you're born with it and you either have it or you don't, but it's something that's developed over time. So maybe what are some things that you can work on to develop, and how do you embark on this process?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. You said something there I wanted to really touch on. Kind of lost it thinking about the whole answer.
It was a big
Happens
question.
to the best of us.
I got stuff. I just want one certain thing to come out, but I'm going to have to leave it back there. Maybe to come out here in a second. But basically, how do you work on it? I mean, you have to want to be better, first of all. You can't assume because maybe I am the boss. Leadership applies to everybody, because it's not about being the boss. It's about developing positive influence with people. Position is actually the lowest level of leadership. Rhea talked about the 5 levels of leadership by John Maxwell. Position is the lowest level. That's in my books I write about, I call that artificial influence. Somebody's got a position, they got artificial influence. It comes with a certain amount of authority and rights to lead and decision making and that kind of stuff. But what I talk about is artificial or authentic influence. That's kind you have to earn. Nobody can give you authentic influence. It don't matter what level you're at. You have to earn it. And that's everything. When we talk about leadership, we're talking about authentic influence. And so the thing I wanted to say a minute ago, I knew it'd come back if I just leave it. I wanted to come out then, but didn't want to. But, we talk about, you always hear our leaders born or made. I mean, everybody usually has an opinion. And what we say, and other people say it too, who truly understand, neither. Leaders are not born or made. Leadership is a choice. I discovered this stuff. I had to choose to change who I was as a person. I had to choose to change the way I lead my spouse, how I lead my son. That's why I was able to rebuild the relationship. I transformed who I was as a person. Up until then, I had blamed him his entire life, and his mother, his step-parents, step-parent, step-grandparents, and all that stuff. And as long as I blamed them, I got bad results. As soon as I realized I was the problem and I fixed me, again, I like best friends. What I've discovered is when I'm doing the right thing, there ain't nobody on this planet that could take that boy away from me. I did it. But used to, I blamed everybody else. And I got the result of blaming the wrong people. As soon as I blamed the right person, looked in the mirror, it was good. So, my one answer is that's why leadership development's 2 components, self-improvement and then leading others. That's why self-improvement would be on the left side, the first thing that we get to. You Got anything on that, right quick?
Yeah, and I would just say, and Mac touched on it, but when we have more influence, life gets better, right? We've got more options, we've got more opportunities, and we cannot grow an organization, we cannot grow a company if we don't grow the people in the organization.
Mm-hmm. And I want to point out, it comes full circle, this artificial versus authentic influence, because when I asked Mac what the number one trait is in what he deems a good person, it's authenticity. And that totally makes sense, that it would be the type of leadership style that you need to have to be truly effective. So looking at the transformation equation here, we've talked about leadership development. Let's talk about the square that says buy-in.
Yeah, the second component is buy-in. And buy-in is second because people buy into the leader before they buy into the leader's vision. So I'll talk about the third component since I'm kind of touching on it, which is unifying purpose, or you could see it as vision, that sort of thing. So buy-in's in between, leadership development, buy-in, and unifying purpose. So buy-in's here because I had to buy into the leader before I'm going to buy into the leader's vision. But a lot of times when leaders try to cast a vision and nobody, John Maxwell says it best, if you think you're a leader and you turn around and nobody's following you, you just out taking a walk.
I've never heard that, and I love that.
But it's true, because this kind of leadership, you only get volunteers. You don't get people who have to follow. You only get people who want to follow. So unifying purpose is what brings everyone together. But you're not going to get there until you get buy-in, and you're not going to get that until you're able to positively influence people authentically. You can, when people buy in because they have to, that's what they'll do. You'll get enough buy-in when people follow you because you have to, based on artificial influence. But when people follow you because they have to, they're only going to do what they have to keep their job and get their pay. There's something way, way bigger than that on the table if you're not really leading with authenticity, with authentic influence. You're leaving a lot on the table. And some people could be very, very successful. Like you asked earlier, how can people be successful? It's because everybody else is doing it. But everybody's leaving something on the table, a lot on the table.
Yeah. And speaking about buy-in, what are some common ways or some tactical things our pros could do to get the right type of buy-in, as you put it?
I'll share something. It's out of my book, Blue Collar Leadership and Supervision, Unleash Your Team's Potential. One of the chapters in there is lead with questions, not directions. You talked about me leading those 11,000 hours of process improvement. That was how I had a week to get buy-in. You guys there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're here. He's listening.
He's doing something crazy. So when I would lead these teams, I didn't have weeks and months and years to get buy-in. I walked in on Monday. I got a group of people. I wouldn't even call them a team of people. Most of them have never worked together before, like on a team. So I would say, give me 6 to 10 people, mix them all up. Somebody who works in the area, a leader, an engineer, someone from the office, someone in accounting. Just give me a team of 6 to 10 people. I don't care who they are, and we're going to go slay the dragon. And so even though they hate change, they hate consultants, they hate the boss who told them they had to be in there for a week. They don't want to change anything because they think it's working great. That's what I got. I got a team like that Monday, and by Friday we had to deliver. And one of the biggest things I would do, besides teach them leadership for the first 4 hours, I did that to get buy-in. I taught them leadership development. I want to get the mindset right so they forget all this mess and start thinking right and thinking about our mission. Forget the mission that's out there that ain't what we're doing this week. We got a mission right here to help you make your job better, not make you work harder, but make your job better and your life better. Get them bought in. So I had to get them to buy into me. Like, what I'm teaching you, if you don't like working here, learn this and go get a job somewhere else. Because I want them to know I care about you as a person. I'm trying to help you as an individual. So that allowed me to get buy-in the first 4 hours on Monday. But the number one thing is lead with questions, not directions. They always think I'm the consultant, I'm the expert. And I wanted to think I'm an expert at asking dumb questions. That's what I wanted to do, because I usually didn't know what they were doing. But I knew what we needed to do. But I knew as soon as I tell them what to do, I own it. As soon as I ask them questions and they tell me what they think they should do, if I don't really like their answer for whatever reason, I just ask them a different question. I don't say, no, we can't do that. Let's do this. I say, have you thought about so-and-so? And when I ask them that question, they may say they have thought about it, and they may tell me something I didn't know. So now I'm bought into their answer. Mm-hmm. See, when you ask somebody a question, two important things happen. You get to learn how they think. So if they think in a way that you like and it builds trust, that's what happens. It builds trust. You trust the way that they think, so you give them a little more space. If you don't like their answer, you get to teach them something. So the second thing I was talking about that happens when you ask a question, one of you learns something.
Mm-hmm.
If they give you an answer with some information you didn't know. See, when you ask somebody a question, you're transferring influence. I'm transferring influence to you. And then now you have an opportunity to influence me because I asked you a question. So are you going to do something with that influence or not? I don't know. It depends on the answer. So
Mm-hmm.
I may learn something from you that I really needed to know that I didn't know. I may have thought I knew, but I didn't. Or you may not know what you need to know, but I don't tell you, I ask you another question. That's when I say, did you think about how that's going to impact Rhea in her area? You may say, no, I didn't even think about it. Rhea's going to be impacted with this. I say, okay, go check on that and get back with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I never take responsibility. I leave ownership over there. When you ask a question, you're not taking responsibility. Although if you're a high impact leader, you understand asking the question is actually taking responsibility because you're leading.
Yep. And also when it's someone else's idea, and so they're putting forth this answer to that question, they're going to take ownership over it rather than you directing. And like you were mentioning, all falls back on your shoulders, which is what, if you're trying to scale, you can't necessarily do that. You can only get to a certain point before that just crushes you. So that makes a lot of sense. And I really like just that golden nugget, which is, lead by asking questions, not direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all too easy, for someone that's on a tight deadline or there's an upset customer or whatever, where it's like, I know what to do, you go do this. But really lead by asking questions and then have them take ownership of it. So I think, sometimes take a step back and see how you're communicating. Are you asking questions or are you just giving directions? So that's really good golden nugget for that buying piece.
Yep. Want to talk about the other two components?
Yes,
Yeah.
let's talk about the other two.
So the other two, the second, you want to get those?
Go ahead.
The fourth component is competency. And then the fifth component is execution. So competency, this book, and let me just say them all together. Leadership development plus buy-in, plus unifying purpose, plus competency, plus execution equals transformation. And so the reason they're in that order is that, there is a reason, right? We talked about the leadership on the front end because it's kind of the foundation for everything else to happen effectively at a high level. Execution is on the last thing, because no matter what all you do, no matter how much buy-in you got, how much influence, how much vision, how much competency, unless you execute,
Doesn't do anything.
there.
Mm-hmm.
These are principles. This equation is principles. You can wrap it around anything. You can wrap it around safety, quality, anything. But I wrapped it around leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So when you read the book, you may get tangled up like competency. I'm not talking about competency to do the job. I'm talking about leadership ability relative to competency in this book. But again, these are principles. So we learned in Guatemala. We were in Guatemala in 2013 with John Maxwell and to kick off the transformation of the nation of Guatemala. And the underlying principle for that entire week, I write and share about it a lot in my books. And don't get tangled up on the numbers. But the research that he quoted and referenced was from Harvard and Stanford. Basically said 87% of our results, our positive influence, comes from our character, only 13% from competency. You have to have a competency, but it's not the most important thing. I was speaking with a CEO and a team member of Airline Ground Support Company, GAT, and speaking with Mike Huff, their CEO, and one of the young men on there asked, do you need a college degree to get promoted? And, he gave him some answer. Then he wanted me to answer them too, and I told him, I said, well, 10 college degrees without good character is worthless. No college degree with a high degree of character is priceless.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is
Yeah.
character, you'll get whatever competency you need to accomplish the mission. But if you have a lot of competency but you don't have character, people don't want to work with you. Think of a doctor with, they may not have 10 degrees, but think that if they had 10 degrees, but they don't like, people don't like them.
Mm-hmm. Lack of compassion, lack of empathy.
Yep. And so I know you guys got more questions, but I'll stop right there.
So We talked about how all 5 equal transformation, but on this model, there's a bunch of black squares, and I think it would. And I mean, you let me know if this is best, but working our way up to what transformation is from the bottom, like what you have maybe even starting out, because I feel like that's where a lot of people start out, is like those bottom few.
Everything's black. And you're like, that is chaos. So like, how did you get to that one, and talk us through that? Because I feel like some of our pros might feel that way.
Actually, the way I got to that one, and Rhea and I were talking about it, but me personally, most of the companies I supported, that's what we had, chaos. They didn't have leadership development. They didn't have buy-in. They didn't have unifying purpose. They didn't have competency relative to leadership and lean manufacturing, which was what I was teaching them. They didn't have competency relative to that. So therefore, they were not executing. That's why I was there to begin with. They wanted to improve the process. So what they had was chaos. And they were highly successful companies. I mean, they were making money. They were doing great in their business. But again, only because the competition was doing the same thing. Soon as one company steps in and does the stuff that we talk about and we write about, and so do a lot of other leadership people, soon as one does that, they're going to separate themselves from the crowd. And everybody else eventually is going to have to do it, or they ain't going to get to play anymore, especially in a small environment, like you say a smaller town or even a big city even. We spoke at a towing company in Washington, D.C. at a conference for towing companies, and we ended up going to speak at one of them in Kansas City. And they were already great. I mean, they had phenomenal. They had like 70 trucks, big fancy trucks, some of them like over $500,000 a piece. And they're doing great, but they bought into this, and they understand where they're going. They're going to be drawing some of the top talent from the other companies, because top talent is looking for this kind of stuff. They're out there.
Yeah, it goes back to the attraction thing that you mentioned.
Yep.
Yep. And if you have some of the components, but you're missing one of them, you can see just on the equation what happens. For example, if you don't have leadership development, but you have the other 4 components, you've got frustration. Because if I don't have any influence and I can't influence people, then I'm frustrated all the time. And, if I don't have competency about about what I'm required to do, then I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I've got anxiety. And so it's easy to see how you might just go through the different day. You might be at different levels of the transformation equation at different points, even in the same day, relative to what's going on in the organization.
I would just add real quick, Maria's talking about competency. When competency is missing, you have anxiety. That's why a lot of leaders who've never heard of this stuff, when they come hear this, they shaking their head, they nod, and they buy in. It makes a lot of sense. But when they really start wading into it, and they realize what all it actually encompasses, especially changing myself, changing the way I lead people, they realize they don't have the competency. They don't have leadership ability at that level. And anxiety sets in. And a lot of them back out, and then they just don't do it. And that's why it takes courage. That's a leadership trait. Courage to actually go implement this. Courage to say, I need to get better as a leader.
I'm wondering, the companies and the organizations that you work with, is there a stage, whether it's frustration, resistance, the anxiety, chaos, or confusion, that you find most small businesses are in, or if they're even able to recognize that in themselves until you say you're missing competency, you're missing leadership?
Yeah, and I don't say it quite like that, because they're a little bit, most of them are insecure. I mean, you can't just say it like that, even though it sounds so simple with us talking about it. When you actually go into that environment, you have to build trust. Whatever that means, it means something different in every place. But most of them don't know. In my book, Defining Influence, I ain't got time to teach it right here, but I talk about the 4 levels of responsibility. And level 1 is transferring responsibility. You don't even know you're supposed to be responsible. Level 2 is acknowledging responsibility. Maybe you come to this type of a seminar or read a book and you become aware that I should be responsible at another level. So I'm acknowledging responsibility, but I haven't taken it yet. I just understand I'm supposed to be. And then accepting responsibility is level 3, where I actually say, I'm going to go lead my organization relative to this at an entirely different level. And you start doing something different. You start reading books. You start doing book studies. You start going to seminars or sending other people. And then level 4 is mastering responsibility, where you do it out of habit. Like, I hate to read, but I read every day. It's a habit. It's just who I am and what I do. So, relative to reading, I'm at level 4. with that responsibility. It's just a habit.
Sure.
So,
sorry.
go ahead.
And what of these kind of holes or common, like you haven't done one of these steps, what do you feel is like the most common remedy? I mean, obviously the first thing is just acknowledging that you're weak in that area. And you said you go through a phase of establishing trust before you can really start digging in super deep. But if I'm self-reflecting on this, like, how would you go about it?
Sure. Michael Josephson said, you don't have to be sick to get better. I mean, you think of the number one athlete in any sport, number one athlete, yet they're out practicing every day to get better. And they better be, because number two's out practicing, right? And so it's realizing and coming from a place of there's nothing wrong with me as a leader, but I don't have to be sick to get better, right? We all have potential to grow and to do better. And I think that's kind of the foundation, is taking that ownership and that responsibility and just saying, you know what, it starts with me. Transformation begins with me. I can't make other people do anything. I can't, and believe me, I've tried. But
Points to Mac.
I love her no matter how she treats me.
I think that if I'm frustrated as a leader, I've got to recognize I need to do something different in my leadership style. Not because there's something wrong with me, but I've got potential to do better.
And I'd like to say a little nugget right there is learn a principle and take action. People always want to know what makes me different from everybody else who reads some of these books. Like, I meet people all the time say they read the 7 Habits, but they couldn't tell you the 7 Habits. I could teach the 7 Habits probably better than I could teach my book. I don't just read a book, especially a good book. I don't just make a quote, write down a quote of a nugget. I go apply it. I'll give you an example. John Maxwell talks about, if you want to find out what kind of leader you are, you go join a volunteer organization.
Lead one.
I mean, well, join one and see what kind of influence you have. What Rhea and I did, we read that. We started a volunteer organization from scratch. It's actually a Central Alabama Mountain Peddlers, or a mountain bike association, to revitalize our state park. And it was phenomenal. We grew up to 150 people in less than 6 months. We built, in 6 months, 15 miles of trails. And that's been, about seven years ago. It's phenomenal what's happened there. But I share that not to toot my own horn, but to say that's how you start. You got to start reading, listening to audios, videos, personal growth, leadership development content. And when a nugget resonates with you, don't just say, oh, that's cool. You say, oh, that's cool, but where do I apply this? How can I apply it at home or at work? Who can I teach it to? That sort of stuff, and go do something with it. That's really all you got to do. It's that simple, but you got to do a lot of it. If you've never done this kind of stuff, you got to get better. You got to sacrifice. People talk about another principle. John Maxwell, law of sacrifice. You got to give up to go up. We gave up everything. When we come and teach, we gave up our salaries. We gave up our cars. We gave up our house to go from doing what we were doing, healthcare administration, lean manufacturing, start doing leadership development, speaking and training. We gave up everything, start over from scratch. And I did it a year before Rhea, and I guess she got jealous of me being broke, so she gave up. The next year, we broke together. We better.
No, I feel like there's a common thread there too. Also, just when it comes to athletes, you can have a coach tell you the perfect form of how to shoot a free throw, but no matter how many videos you watch, how many Michael Jordan documentaries you watch, what really defined him versus the other people is he would actually go sacrifice, do the darn thing 10,000 times every single day, and just do it over and over again and develop the muscle to become what he became. It's no different in any other part of your life. Is you have to put it into action. You have to apply it, and then you have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Because just doing it once doesn't count. You need to get that incremental improvement day over day to see the progress that you want, especially if you're going through things like this on the personal development side and the leadership side, et cetera, that might seem a little foreign to you because you might have not gone into business thinking, oh, I need to be a great leader. You might have just gone, hey, I'm a good plumber and I know I can make money on this. You went into business, and then all of a sudden now you're like, wait a minute, I got to do this to then get to this in my business and get, 5 or 6 other journeyman plumbers to follow me, in a battle in my business. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mac, Rhea, that brings up another question I have. So obviously practice makes perfect. We're never going to be perfect in our journey of learning, but for our pros who are working 10 plus hours a day, and they still want to develop that skill of consuming really valuable content, whether it's on leadership, whether it's on business or operations, whatever it may be. What tips do you have for them to start practicing that?
Well, I would say, start small, do small amounts. When we're speaking, I always hold up my hand and tell people, how long does it take you to read a paragraph? And usually somebody will say 30 seconds. I'll say, that's all I'm asking you to do. 30 seconds. You may be busy, but you got 30 seconds, I promise you, right? So and that's my rule. Sometimes I may read a whole book, but my goal is only to read one paragraph a day. And usually I read more than that. But if I read one, I've kept my commitment to myself, got my integrity with myself. But the thing is, you usually can't just read one, especially if it's interesting. You got to read 2 or 3. But people who are busy, don't change and say, well, that sounds good, Mac. Paragraph sounds good. I'm going to make myself a goal of a page or a chapter. Don't do that, because you may be busy. You may really be busy and you can't get to the chapter or the page. So then you don't do it. So now you've let yourself down. You hadn't kept your commitment. You can keep this commitment. One paragraph. If you want to read more, that's fine. You read a whole book, that's fine. But tomorrow, if you read a whole book today, tomorrow you still got to read a paragraph. And you could say, listen to a minute of a podcast. Both of us have podcasts, but there's a lot of other podcasts out there. Whoever you're attracted to, whoever's growing, just make it small. It's kind of like the compound effect in the bank. I got to speak at Yale University. That's crazy. Doesn't even make sense. That was never a goal. The goal is read every day, grow every day, get better every day. And then, 10 years later, which is 2018, get an invitation to speak at Yale University on blue-collar leadership, innovation and talent development. So you never know what's going to happen if you just keep doing it over and over and over and over.
Yeah, that concept too. So James Clear wrote a great book on it called Atomic Habits. It's really just finding something small and then building and building and building. Because before you know it, you're, oh yeah, I'm going to read one paragraph, and all of a sudden you sat down and, you read the whole book. Or, hey, when it comes to working out, you go out, you go, I'm just going to walk 1 mile. And then while you're out there, you all of a sudden you start doing more, and you didn't even know it. But you got to build that. You just got to commit yourself. You do that small piece. So that's a great question for our pros that are super busy.
And that kind of leads me into one of our last questions is, you said before you have 26 books between the 3 of you, but something really great about the books is the size of it. And so you kind of answered this already, but why do you write the size books that you do? And why is it the perfect book for this blue collar crowd?
Yeah, most of my books, with the exception of the first couple, most of them are 30 chapters, 3 pages per chapter, so that they are easily digested. A chapter's 3 pages. You can read a chapter in 6 or 7 minutes. If you're a slow reader like me, probably 3 minutes, if you read like Rhea. That's not a joke. She reads at least twice as fast as I do. But for me, it's 6 or 7 minutes, to read a chapter. So, you read a chapter a day. I still say focus on the paragraph. But if you read a chapter a day, you get a book done in 30 days, within a month. So that's one reason. People ask all the time, why do I write little books? So people will read them, right? That's one reason. But the other reason is so leaders who actually want to lead, some leaders will say when they buy our books, they'll say, how are we going to make sure that people read the books? We don't want to buy a bunch of books and invest in books. People are not going to read them. I say, Mr. or Miss Leader, you read it with them. Then that's leadership, right? I'm going to read it with you. And so that's another reason there's small chapters. We sit here, we can read it together, whether there's 2 of us or 10 of us. We recommend 4 to 10 people. All you have to do, take turns reading a paragraph, go around the table, or get on a video system, and take turns. Take turns reading a paragraph. It's going to take you 6 to 7 minutes, no matter how many people there are. While you're reading, highlight your key points in your book. Hopefully everybody's got a hard copy. They can highlight your key points. So at the end of the 6 or 7 minutes of reading, everybody's got some stuff highlighted. Now everybody gets 1 minute to share their key takeaway. And the most important thing is why. It's very powerful if that why will be from a place of humility. Not pride and ego, but humility. Say, I underline this because yesterday I got it wrong with Rhea. I may get it right all the time, but yesterday I got it wrong. Or I got it wrong with somebody at work. Or I got it wrong with a client or a customer. that sort of thing, or a coworker, anything like that. That's all you have to do. So you don't have to do any homework. Whoever's facilitating, leading the discussion doesn't have to do any preparation. Nobody's got to teach. Nobody should teach. We shouldn't sit here and try to, if you say something, Alexa, and then I say, well, that's kind of right, but I see it like this. We shouldn't do that. We read together. We talk about our key point and why. We don't judge each other. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. We don't clap and go crazy. We keep it very generic and just let it take care of itself. When we get done, we get up and leave. If we want to talk about the content, we should do that in a separate meeting. Come back and talk about it, where you say what you think and I say what I think. We talk about what we think and other people jump in. That should be a separate thing beyond the book study. If you want the book study to be powerful.
What a great team building activity too. We, especially now that we're more virtual, whether you have, like, even if you have a blue collar business and your techs are out in the field, where you used to be able to joke around in the office, stick around, have a beer, or, go out together, you could do something like this where it really is investing in their development as an employee and as a leader. You can do it virtually or in person. And to wrap us up here, you two create so many amazing resources. And if I'm a pro, where can I find the both of you and look for new content and things that you're releasing?
So topstoryleadership.com is where you find out about both of us, and that'll lead you anywhere else you want to go. It'll take you to Ria's website, which is riastory.com. It'll take you to my website. If you're a blue collar person, you want to go straight to my website, bluecollarleadership.com. And I would share with your viewers that if you type in bluecollarleadership.com / the word download, bluecollarleadership.com/download, you actually can access the first 5 chapters of all of my 5 blue collar leadership books that's in there.
Wow.
You can see the outline of the rest of it. So you can go basically almost get a whole book for free. Plus there's other books on there, and there's links to Ria's books to get some free downloads there. And in LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, we put out content every day on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We put out little nuggets every day. In our podcast, Blue Collar Leadership is my podcast. Ria, R-I-A, Story is her podcast. We both put out a new episode every week. I've got a couple hundred almost on mine, and you 150 or
About
so.
150, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so for our pros that are listening and or watching, we're going to have a blog post that accompanies this episode, so that we'll have all the links to all the things Mack and Ria just mentioned. One thing we'd love to do as well is understand, you've spoken to a lot of companies, spoken to a lot of different people. We love bringing on great guests, and we know that our great guests will bring on other great guests. Who's somebody, or maybe there's a couple different people you think, knowing now who our audience is, that our pros could learn a lot from and have a lot of golden nuggets to share?
You go ahead. You go first.
So for me, he's not a blue collar guy, but I think he kind of is. He just got a white collar mind, but he's a blue collar guy. But he was a plant manager. His name's Amir Gannad, AmirGhannad. What's amazing, awesome about Amir, he understands all the same stuff. I actually helped introduce him to the folks at Yale, so he got to speak the same time we were there. Amir is the only person that I know of that I would let speak for me if I wasn't available and I had to recommend somebody else. I'm picky about character. When somebody's representing me, our brand is character. What we're selling is character, so we don't just let anyone else do it. But he came here from Iran, couldn't speak English when he was 16 by himself, and he just retired a year or 2 ago. I met him through LinkedIn because he was interested in my Blue Collar Leadership book, but he retired as the Global Leadership Development of Operational Excellence, whatever his title was, for Campbell Soup, $8 billion Campbell Soup.
Wow.
He reported directly to one of the presidents of Campbell Soup, but he was a plant manager of a lot of different type, blue collar plants. But he's a real dude. I mean, when you see him, he's polished. He don't talk like I do. He talks better English than me, and he's from Iran.
No, that'll be an awesome intro. He sounds like a great person to bring on, and a lot of wealth and knowledge, especially working his way all the way up through his career. Ria, did you have somebody in mind?
No, Amir is the first person that came to my mind as well. So I just kind of echo Mack's recommendation. I have heard Amir speak probably 3 or 4 times, and I always get a golden nugget from his presentations. And, it's just, it's one of those things where you go back through it and you reflect on it and you're like, man, this is something I can take away and actually apply. And I think that's very valuable. We hear a lot of information, but if you don't do anything with it, it's not really helpful. Whereas when I listen to Amir speak, I walk away with something that I could do differently.
I got one more for you since Rhea didn't have another one.
Yeah.
This gentleman, he took my books as a maintenance man in the international paper at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and started leading his small team. And then they got so many results that he started being asked to lead other maintenance teams, and then just cascaded it even further than that. Then they bought 200 of our books and brought us up. But he started from just a frontline entry-level supervisor in maintenance. His name's Justin Galloway. And I interviewed him on my podcast not too long ago, maybe episode in the 170s, somewhere in there. But he could tell you about doing book studies. He'd never done this way with my books. And he and his wife are both certified to teach a lot of John Maxwell stuff, like Rhea and I are. We don't really do that anymore. But his wife had introduced him to me. But he's a guy, blue collar guy, still on the front lines, leading. But he can in a union environment as well. But he can tell you about the amazing results that he got. So that's, Amir can tell you from a high level about some cool stuff, and Justin can tell you at the ground level what it's like to actually do a lot of the stuff we've been talking to you about doing.
That's super cool. So this is why I feel like it's a blessing in disguise is, two guest introductions. That is awesome. That's definitely going to be great information for our pros to bring forward. So one thing we like to do, because we've got a bunch of these books, we want to give them away. So one thing that we're going to ask our pros to do, if you're interested in Mack's book, so this is the Blue Collar Leadership. This is the 5 components book. I'm going to ask Mack to pose a question to you guys. So in order to get this book, you have to text ProTalks to 31996. When you get the text, you click the link and you just select the book. So you select Mack's book, and there's going to be a question. So what question do you want to have pros answer to make sure that they're getting the book and they're going to put it into action and not just getting a free book? What's that question you'd like to ask them, and they'll provide a thoughtful answer for?
Is your lack of awareness holding you back?
Great question. Is your lack of awareness holding you back? So once again, pros, if you're watching this, you would like to have a copy of this book. We bought a whole bunch of them. We're going to give them to you guys. And so what you'll need to do is answer that question, but you'll text ProTalks to 31996. There'll be a link. You click it and you just fill it in right there. You give us your address and we will ship you the book.
All right. Thank you so much, Mack and Rhea, for spending some time with us today, walking us through the transformation equation. We will have this available on that page that Roland was saying with all of Mack and Rhea's links. And I'm excited to talk to Rhea again later this week for a special Lady Pro episode. So again, we really do appreciate your both's time, and we look forward to talking again shortly.
Yeah, thank you
so much, guys.
It's a privilege to be here. You guys were awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Look forward to seeing you next week. For more information, go to housecallpro.com/ProTalks.